Today we will talk about the respiratory system. First, we'll see the parts or organs of this system. Then we'll talk about the processes occur inside the respiratory system. 4 processes of respiration. We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about individual organs. First we'll talk about the nose, nasal cavity, then larynx, pharynx. Okay. We'll talk about the respiratory membrane, pleura, and the layers of pleura. We'll talk about the mechanism of breathing or respiration and surfactant. Surfactant is a fluid secreted inside the alveoli of the lung. It is a very important fluid. We'll talk about that. So first, the parts of the respiratory system or organs of the respiratory system. If you start from above, go downwards. First is the nose. Inside the nose, you have the nasal cavity. Okay. Only a part of nose you see from outside. You see this part, right? That is called external nose. Most part is inside. Inside the nose, you have a large cavity, that is the nasal cavity, and around that cavity, nasal cavity, you have paranasal sinuses inside the bones. You must remember from NP1, we have sinuses in the facial bones, right? Ethmoidal sinuses, maxillary sinus, right? Frontal sinus. So those are called paranasal sinuses. Then next organ is the pharynx, which is a muscular tube, no cartilage. Then below the pharynx, next part is called the larynx. Larynx is mainly cartilaginous. Mainly what? Cartilaginous. And then you have trachea. Trachea is mainly cartilaginous as well as muscular. So both. So you see, pharynx is what?
Muscular.
Muscular. Larynx is mainly cartilaginous. Trachea is both. Okay? It has both cartilages and muscle. Larynx is also known as voice box.
Larynxes?
Yeah. Why? Because inside the larynx you have vocal cords. Have you heard vocal cords? That produce what? Sound. So, vocal cords are located inside the larynx, right? That's why this is a sound box. Trachea is also known as windpipe. Air passes through trachea and goes to the lung. Then trachea, the lower end of trachea, divides into 2 divisions or branches. So this is trachea, lower end divides into 2, and they enter into your lungs. Okay, so this is trachea. Okay, these are lungs, and these 2 divisions are called primary or main bronchus. Primary bronchus. Okay. So this is right primary bronchus or main bronchus, this is left primary or left main bronchus. Okay. When you hear bronchus, that means singular. This is right bronchus, this is left bronchus. When we say bronchi, that means plural. Okay. So cus is singular, chi is plural. Okay. So then after the bronchi enter into the lungs, they divide into many branches. Okay, like the tree, branches of the tree. Large branches give small branches, right? The tree. So exactly like that. Okay. So bronchus enters into the lung and divides again and again to form a tree. That is called bronchial tree. Make sense? So that is called what? Bronchial tree. So it's like, many branches like that. So we'll see what are those divisions or branches, but just wait for a while. So you see trachea, then right and left bronchi, and their branches inside the lung. Make sense? And the last organs are what? Your right and left lungs. Okay? And inside the lung, you have million of tiny balls, air balls. Those are called alveoli. Okay? So, lungs, and inside the lung, you have air balls. Those are called what? Alveoli. Okay? Again, I is plural. If I say alveolus, that means one alveolus. Okay? I is plural. So alveolus, alveoli. Okay, so those are the parts of your respiratory system. So here in this picture you can see the nasal cavity, then you see the pharynx, larynx, trachea, and primary bronchi. Okay? Then the lungs. Now we'll see those branches inside the lung. Bronchial tree. Primary bronchi right and left, right? They enter into the lungs, and then after that secondary bronchi. So primary bronchi enters into the lung, and divides into secondary. So first divisions are secondary. Then tertiary. Then further division occurs, and those are called bronchioles. And then terminal bronchioles, but not done yet. Okay, so primary bronchus enters into the lung and it divides into secondary bronchi. Secondary divides further to form tertiary bronchi, and from tertiary the branches are called bronchioles, and from the bronchioles the branches, further smaller branches, are terminal bronchioles. Bronchioles are very narrow, like less than 1 millimeter diameter. So very narrow tubes. Terminal bronchioles are even narrower, less than 0.5 millimeter diameter. Okay. So after terminal bronchiole, so this is your terminal bronchiole, the last one here, okay, less than 0.5 millimeter. Then more branches occur. These are called, so this is terminal, bronchial. Then next is respiratory. Respiratory bronchial. So these are respiratory. And then from respiratory, further branches occur. These are called alveolar duct. Alveolar duct. And then alveoli are attached to the duct. Like you know the grapes. You see the grapes are attached to those tiny branches. So these are alveoli. Alveoli. So after terminal bronchial, this one already very narrow, right? Less than half millimeter. Then further branches are called respiratory bronchioles. And from respiratory, alveolar ducts, and alveoli are attached to the alveolar ducts. Now, these three together is called respiratory zone. Okay? All other structures before these three, like all these, plus the trachea, larynx, pharynx, all those nasal cavity together called conducting zone. So from the lung, from the nose to terminal bronchial, That means from the nose all the way here, down here, is conducting zone. So, two zones you see in your respiratory system. Only last three structures, respiratory bronchial, alveolar duct, alveoli, belong to respiratory zone. Everything before that belong to what? Conducting zone. Is it clear? So from your nose to terminal bronchial, conducting. Why? Because those structures are only for the passage of what? Air. Gas exchange occurs where? In these three structures. That's why these three belong to what? Respiratory zone. Make sense? Exchange of gas between blood and these three structures. Yeah. So interrespiratory zone is divided into conducting and respiratory zones.
So you said respiratory zone is respiratory zone because that's where the exchange of gases happen?
Exchange of gases take place, yes. So your nose to terminal bronchial, those structures are designed to do what? For the passage of air. Is it clear? No exchange. Which structures are designed for gas exchange? Respiratory bronchial, alveolar duct, alveoli. Is it clear? Okay. Nose. First, let's see the nose. As I have mentioned, the part you see from outside, that is the external nose, and inside the nose, you have a cavity, that is the nasal cavity, that we don't see from outside. Functions of your nose. Nose moisten the air that you inhale. If the air is too dry, inside the nose is moist. You all know that, right? Secretion occurs. So, mucus. So the surface is wet. So when you inhale air, that dry air gets a little bit wet. Okay? When it comes contact to the nasal cavity. Number one. Number two, warms the gas. When you, in winter, like right now, if you go outside, right, you inhale, take the air, right, that air is very warm, very what?
Dry.
Cold, right, and dry, too. Cold, right? If that cold air directly enters into your lung, there is a chance that you will get pneumonia or other infections, okay? Too cold, right, air? So what happens when you inhale the air comes contact to the nasal cavity, and nasal cavity is warmer. Why? Because a lot of capillaries are there. Blood is flowing, a lot of blood is flowing there, okay? And you know that where blood flows more, that area is what? Warm. So your nasal cavity wall is warm. Not only wet, but also warm. So inhaled gas will get wet as well as warmer before it enters into the lung, which is safe. Otherwise, cold air will directly enter into the lung. Filters and cleans inspired air. Two ways your nose cleans the air. One is inside the nose you have hair, right? So hair blocks large dirt particles or dust. And the surface is what? Not only moist but sticky, right? Sticky surface inside the nose that will trap the small dust particles, because small dust will get attached to the sticky surface, right? So when the air circulates inside the nasal cavity, the dust particles will be blocked by two ways. One is by the hair, another by the sticky surface. Serves as a resonating chamber for speech. Your nose plays a role in producing your speech. How you know that? When you get cold, right? You see the sound changes, right? By listening the voice you can tell, right? That person got cold. So if you hold your nose, close your nose like this and talk, your sound will be a little bit distorted. Make sense? So nose plays role in production of speech. Around the nasal cavity, you remember, you have paranasal sinuses, right? Maxillary sinuses, frontal sinuses, right? Ethmoidal sinuses. So the presence of those sinuses help you to improve the sound that you produce. So paranasal sinuses play an important role in improving the quality of sound that you produce. Smell and taste. You all know that without smell, the food you eat is not, is not very tasty. It's not like, perfect taste you don't enjoy without smelling, right? So when you get cold again, if you eat food, you'll see the taste is not like, the real taste. So we say two different things, One is called taste of food and another is called flavor of food. Taste plus smell together is called what? flavor of food. Okay? So to enjoy the flavor of food, you need to do what? Smell at the same time. Okay? If you don't smell, the taste is not perfect. It's not a flavor. Is it clear? Taste is only what your sensation on the tongue, and smell is nose. Then if you join them, that is the flavor to enjoy the food. Now, nasal cavity is divided by a septum, partition. That is called nasal septum. And inside the nose, nasal cavity, you have concha. Those are shelf-like structures like this. And there are 3 concha in each side. So this is the nose, okay? This is the nasal cavity, septum in between. So this is right half of the nose, this is left half of the nose. And from the lateral wall, 3 shelf-like structures like this arise. So superior nasal concha, middle concha, inferior concha. Okay? Three, okay, from each side, from the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. And this is the septum, nasal septum. Okay? Now, this nasal septum has bony part and cartilaginous part. Okay? So we'll talk about that. Just know that nasal septum, the partition, part of it is formed by bones and part of it is formed by cartilage. Okay. Then the roof of nasal cavity is formed by 2 bones, ethmoid and sphenoid. Those 2 bones are in the roof of the nasal cavity. The floor of the nasal cavity is the palate. So palate is the floor. Now you see, if you put your finger inside your mouth and move up, you will touch the roof of the mouth, right? Oral cavity. And which is actually separating the nasal cavity and oral cavity. Make sense? So here is the palate, nasal cavity, oral cavity. Okay? So now I can tell the roof of the oral cavity is the floor of the nasal cavity. Make sense? Okay. So palate is the floor of the nasal cavity. And palate has 2 parts again. Hard part is the bony part and soft part is the muscular part. Okay? That's why hard and soft. Bone and muscle. Then the lining, inner lining is called respiratory mucosa. And in respiratory mucosa, you have a lot of sensory nerve endings and capillaries. In respiratory mucosa, you have plenty of nerve endings, sensory nerves, and capillaries. Now you tell me how the sensory nerves help. Plenty of sensory nerves.
Sneeze.
You know, yeah, sneeze. If something, irritant enters into your nose, immediately you sneeze, right? Strong response. Or if you put something inside, like a piece of cotton or something, thin, you will sneeze, right? Because highly sensitive. Makes sense? And a lot of capillaries, because lot of blood flow.
You said that hard and soft palate have a hard part and a what part? You said a bony part and a what part?
And muscular part. Okay, here you see. This is palate, okay? This part is bony part, and this part is muscular part. Make sense? So anterior or front part is the bony part, posterior back part is the muscular part. And this is one side of nasal cavity. So you see concha, superior, middle, inferior, and the concha are separated by the folds like this. Look at me. This is one concha, then like this, another concha like this, another concha like this, right? So in between the folds like this, these are called meatus. So meatus are in between concha. So actually it is like this. This is one concha and the fold. This is another concha. This is another concha. Okay. These are three concha, superior, middle, inferior, and these are meatuses. Okay. The folding in between. You see the roof of nasal cavity. You can see the cribriform plate of ethmoid. You must remember from NP1. In ethmoid bone, you have seen many tiny holes, cribriform plate, olfactory foramina, so olfactory nerve fibers pass through them. Olfactory nerve fibers carry olfaction, that means smell signal from the nose to the brain, right? From the nose, what kind of signal go to the brain?
Sensory.
Smell, right? Yes, smell, right? Because this is the organ for smell. So olfactory nerve fibers or smell nerve fibers pass through those tiny holes you see in ethmoid bone and go to the brain. And in the back you have sphenoid. So those are two. Respiratory mucosa, I have already talked about that. The epithelium of respiratory mucosa, this is important, in nasal cavity is pseudostratified ciliated columnar. Pseudostratified ciliated columnar. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. So the cells like columnar cells, and they have what? These are what? Hair-like structures. Cilia, right? Cilia, remember that? And cilia are soft hair-like structures. So inside the nose, in the epithelium, you have cilia. And how that cilia helps? You know, I said that the dust particles are trapped, right? So they must be cleared up, cleaned from there, right? Regularly. So what happens? The cilia, like million of cilia, bit like this. Okay? It's like broom cleaning the mucus, dirty mucus. Okay? So mucus is getting dirty, right? Because of dust particles are getting attached to the sticky mucus, right? So it should be pushed back towards the pharynx. So that's why the lining is ciliated columnar, very important. Okay? To broom, clean the mucus, dirty mucus. In respiratory mucosa, you have mucus and serous secreting glands or cells. Okay? Mucus is sticky, that I have mentioned. Mucus is sticky secretion, comes from mucus glands. And serous glands or cells secrete watery secretion that contains two very important chemicals. In serous secretion, you have two very important chemicals, lysozyme and defensins. So I am going back again. You have two types of secretory glands in the mucosa. One is mucus secreting gland or cells, and another is serous glands or cells. Mucus glands secrete mucus which is sticky. Helps to clean the air, and serous glands secrete water and those two chemicals, defensin and lysozyme. Okay, so that is serous, and these two chemicals can kill the microorganisms, can destroy the microorganisms. So you see, both secretions are helpful, right? Mucus cleans the air, dust particles, right? Mucus sticky, and serous secretion has the chemicals that can destroy the microorganisms. Lot of nerve plexuses and capillaries that I have already mentioned. Capillaries, because of lot of capillaries, blood flow is more inside the nasal cavity wall. So more blood goes there, blood is warmer, so keep the surface warm. And lot of nerve plexuses or nerve endings to make the nasal cavity highly sensitive. Okay, so it's sensory nerve endings, triggers, we have already talked about it. Okay. Now, 4 processes of respiration. 4 processes take place, and those are, you need to know, pulmonary ventilation, the first one, which is very simple. What is pulmonary ventilation? Breathing. Pulmonary ventilation is what?
Breathing.
Breathing. That means what? Inhale, exhale. Is it clear? Inspiration, expiration. That is pulmonary ventilation. Then, external respiration. So, air enters into the lung, and after the air enters into the lung, after you inhale the air goes to the lung. And what happens in the lung? Exchange of gas. So, inside the lung, you have these balls. These are called what?
Alveoli.
Alveoli. Very good. So, around the alveoli, you have capillaries. Many capillaries, blood capillaries, okay, attached to the alveoli. So if I just see one alveolus from here, okay, just only one, this is the alveolus, and this is the capillary attached to the alveolus, okay. So alveolus, and this is the blood capillary. Okay. So what happens in the lung? The exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide take place between the alveolus and the blood. Exchange of gases. Which gases? Oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay. Now you tell me. Think very simple. You inhale the air to get what? Your body needs what? Which gas? Oxygen, right? So you inhale the air to get oxygen, right? So from the lung, oxygen should go to the blood, right? From the alveoli of the lung, oxygen should go to the blood. Blood, you all know, blood is going to the lung to get what? Oxygen. We have talked about that in cardiovascular, right? So blood goes to the lung to get what?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. And give carbon dioxide to the lung. That carbon dioxide will do what? Expel. Right? So very simple. So now you already know that from the alveolus of the lung, oxygen will go to the blood, capillary blood, and carbon dioxide will go from blood to the alveoli of the lung. Is it clear? Now, this is a rule. This will make everything easy. Oxygen and carbon dioxide always move in opposite direction. Always move in what? Opposite direction. So if you know one, you know another. Okay? You know other. So I said, you already know blood gets oxygen, right? From the lung. So blood gives carbon dioxide to the lung. Opposite. So that is called external respiration. External respiration, which occurs in the lung. Very simple. External respiration occurs where? In the lung. Okay? If you know that, you know what happens in the lung. This is what happens in the lung. Then, after the oxygen enters into the blood, blood does what? What's the function of blood? Transportation, right? Of chemicals, including gases. So, transportation of gases from the lung to the tissue, from tissue to the lung. Make sense?
Yep.
Blood transports the gases. Now you tell me, blood transports which one to the tissue? Oxygen or carbon dioxide? Oxygen, you will know, right? Because tissue needs oxygen. The blood takes oxygen from the lung and delivers to the tissue. Is it clear? And tissue gives carbon dioxide. I said opposite always. So tissue gives carbon dioxide to the blood. Blood gives oxygen to the tissue. Tissue gives what? Carbon dioxide to the blood. Okay? That carbon dioxide blood transports to the lung and we expel out. Is it clear? So that is transportation part. Now, if you go to the tissue, we know blood gives oxygen to the tissue. So let's see that. These are the cells of the tissue. So this is the tissue. Tissue. And blood capillary. So blood gives oxygen to the tissue and tissue gives carbon dioxide to the blood. So what happens in the tissue? That is called internal respiration. Occurs where? In the tissue. External respiration occurs where? In the lung. External. Internal in the tissue. Is it clear? Okay. So those are 4 processes. Okay, now the first 2 processes, that means breathing, pulmonary ventilation, and gas exchange, external respiration, these 2 occur in the respiratory system, right? You breathe by your respiratory system, right? And inside the lung, gas exchange, so lung is respiratory, right? But other 2, transportation by what? Blood, right? And blood is not a part of respiratory system. Blood is a part of cardiovascular, right? And capillaries, blood vessels, all those cardiovascular, right? So, transportation and the exchange between the blood and tissue through the capillary wall, that is circulatory system. Okay? So 2 systems now you see must work what?
Together.
Together, right? To complete the function. Is it clear? Respiratory alone cannot complete the function. Has to give the oxygen to the blood, right? And blood should transport and exchange should occur through the capillary wall. Okay? So you see that these two systems in your body are working closely together, right? Working together. Respiratory and cardiovascular. Okay. Pharynx. After the nose or nasal cavity, next organ is the pharynx. Pharynx is a kind of tube. Anybody remember? Muscular, cartilaginous, or what? Muscular tube. Pharynx is I mentioned at the very beginning, muscular tube from the nasal cavity to the larynx and esophagus. So, that is the pharynx, muscular tube from the nasal cavity to the larynx and esophagus. So, what happens? The lower end of pharynx, this is the pharynx, okay? From lower end, two tubes start, two pathways. One is the larynx and another is the esophagus. Okay? So, larynx and esophagus. You see here, this is pharynx. So what happens? Both food and water, food and air come down like this. Okay? So this is pharynx, is common passage for food and air. Make sense? But at some point they should be separated, right? Food should go to the stomach, esophagus, right? And air should go to the lung. Make sense? Food should not go to the lung, or air should not go to the stomach. Make sense? So, here you have those two separate pathways. Esophagus in the back, larynx in the front. So larynx in the front, esophagus is behind here. This is for food, you all know. This is for air. And there is a structure here that covers the larynx, laryngeal inlet, that is called epiglottis. Epiglottis, that covers the entrance of larynx. So food, when you are eating, swallowing the food, food should go that way, should not enter here. That will be dangerous, right? If food enters into your lung, that would be dangerous. So there is a cap, lid, that is called the epiglottis. Okay? Anyway, now the pharynx has three parts. It has three parts. Behind the nasal cavity, the part of pharynx is called nasopharynx. It makes sense. Behind the nose. That's why it is called nasal. Behind the oral cavity, the part that is called oropharynx. And the last part, which is attached to the larynx, you see here, this is the last part. From where the larynx starts, this part is called the laryngopharynx. So naso, oro, laryngo, the last part. So those are three parts of your pharynx. Only nasopharynx is for air, only. Only nasopharynx part behind the nose is for air. Oropharynx and laryngopharynx both are for both food and air. So common. Okay. Here you see Nasopharynx, the top part, oropharynx, the middle part, and laryngopharynx is the last part. This part is the laryngopharynx. Oropharynx, this is mouth, oral cavity. So oropharynx is this part. This is nasal cavity. So nasopharynx is this part. Okay. So 3 parts of pharynx. Now, in the nasopharynx, first let's see the nasopharynx. In nasopharynx, you have pharyngeal tonsil. You have pharyngeal tonsil attached to the posterior wall of nasopharynx. So, there. This is nasopharynx attached to the posterior wall of nasopharynx. Another important structure is there, that is the opening of pharyngotympanic tube. Here, the opening of a tube, that is called pharyngo